I am Monica Largesse, a second-year MDiv student at Yale Divinity School, conducting this interview from Vienna, Austria. I'm happy to be your host today for our second episode in our series on transformational leadership in a turbulent time. Our guest today is Ashley McCarr, who received a Master's of Divinity from Yale in 2014. Since then, she's been doing community engagement work for IRIS. The IRIS stands for Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services in New Haven, Connecticut. She's also a writer who has an ebook of essays called You Were Strangers. Her writing is also published in Sojourners, Christian Century, Tablet Magazine, The Struggle Continues, the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute weblog, Religious Dispatches, and the New Haven Arts paper. So after all of that, can you tell us, what is IRIS?
Yeah, so IRIS is a nonprofit that works with refugees and other types of immigrants throughout Connecticut. Our office is based in New Haven, and of course, we're in exceptional times now, but when we're not facing a pandemic, it's really a bustling and vibrant social service agency. I wish I could take all of you on a visit. Someday, maybe we can do that. But for now, I'll just have to describe the scene on a typical day at IRIS. The stairs and the lobby and the hallways will be packed with people from all walks of life, people chatting in Arabic and Swahili and Spanish and Dari and Pashto and languages that I had never heard of before. There's often a church lady pulling up in a van to drop off donations of pots and pans and furniture and coats and knickknacks, and she'll talk your ear off about her knitting ministry, and you're receiving these donations graciously. And there's refugees and immigrants waiting to go to their English class or waiting to see their case managers. The best image I can give you is how one visitor described IRIS, which she said it's low budget UN meets Goodwill meets the DMV. So that's pretty much IRIS in a nutshell. But I would say for me, there is an exhilarating chaos that's just so life-giving.
Okay, that is the best description I've ever heard, I think. Yeah.
Great.
So in that exhilarating chaos, what is it that you're doing?
Yeah, so I am the community liaison for IRIS, which essentially means that I foster relationships. I serve as a liaison between IRIS communities that would like to get involved and our refugee and immigrant clients. My primary role in this capacity is to cultivate what we call community co-sponsors. So those are congregations or coalitions that basically build a team of volunteers to welcome and resettle a refugee family in their city or town. So this can happen anywhere in Connecticut. So IRIS trains them and prepares them to do this work. Of course, many congregations get involved, and I take a role in preparing them for that tremendous undertaking. And I really see a lot of this work as a gentle form of redirecting. Sometimes people who are interested in co-sponsoring a refugee family ask how they can adopt a refugee family. And I really, work to reorient them towards partnering with a refugee family, working with a refugee family to empower them to build their own lives here, because that's what refugee resettlement is all about, and any type of immigration work. And particularly when I work with Christian congregations, of course, it often starts with just planting a seed about the possibility of a congregation, either alone or collaborating with other groups, co-sponsoring a refugee family. And I often get to do preaching engagements, which is a fun way to apply the MDiv background. And I really try to flip the script of welcoming the stranger. So I talk about how refugees have welcomed me even when they're
Yeah.
newcomers in this country. I talk about how much I've learned about hospitality and kinship from refugees, and I'm really trying to orient people from a mentality of charity to an ethic of mutuality.
Wow. That's a lot of work. It's a big job.
Yeah,
It's
it's
incredible.
what they call soft skills.
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't, I'm not doing direct service, so I'm not the one who has to, help refugees find jobs, and
Yeah.
that's hard work too. So we all have our role.
Yeah, absolutely. So your role there is facing the community, it
Hmm.
seems like, rather than
Hmm.
refugee. Um, would you consider yourself a leader in the community? And could you talk a bit about what leadership is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't tend to think of myself as a leader. I'm quite introverted, and one of my least favorite questions is, "What is your goal?" Um, I I'm very process oriented, and I tend to think of leadership as very outcome oriented. And of course, that's a big part of effective leadership. Um, but as I talked about, this role of gently guiding and redirecting, and also being guided and directed
Mm.
by the people that I'm working with, including the community partners that Iris works with, but also, and I would say primarily, I learn so much and I'm guided so much by my coworkers and by the refugee and immigrant clients that we work with. Although I don't have a direct service job, just
Mm.
being at Iris, I get to engage with refugees a lot. Also, we often, with community outreach speaking engagements, we bring refugee speakers with us. So some of my
Yeah.
work is working with refugee speakers to do a presentation or a panel together. So I learn a lot through that process. So for me, although leadership can be quite agenda driven, my style of leadership is very intention driven. I set intentions for my work, and I really listen and leave myself open for those intentions to be shaped by the people that I'm working with, be it a congregation that wants to welcome a refugee family, the refugee and immigrant clients of Iris, and my coworkers. So it's a lot of integrating different approaches and perspectives, and it's really it requires a lot of reflection, and I would say that at least in my view, deep leadership involves a lot of deep listening, and a willingness to be shaped and guided by what you hear. So the leadership that I get to develop and practice through my work at Iris is very relationship driven.
Wow. That's encouraging as a fellow introvert,
Mm-hmm.
very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to the idea of wanting to listen and take
Yeah.
things in. Yeah, that's one of the great privileges of divinity school too, is listening to classmates and just
Absolutely.
taking things in, understanding
Mhm.
that deep leadership, relationship driven.
Mhm.
Yeah, what a wonderful idea. So, as an introvert, sometimes I don't see myself as facing the community and doing things. Are you
Mhm.
surprised to be doing this work?
Absolutely. So I, for many years, probably since I was a senior in high school, up until my first year at YDS, which was a span of about 10 years, I thought I was going to have an academic career. And I like books, I like the
Mm,
library, I
yeah.
like ideas.
Yeah.
Um, so I came to YDS starting out as an MAR. For folks who aren't Yale Divinity in the Yale Divinity community, an MAR is a Master of Arts in Religion. It's one of the two main tracks at Yale Divinity School, and generally it's thought to be a pretty academic track. And I started in the MAR track thinking that was going to be preparation for a PhD.
Okay.
And then sometime during my first year, I had I can say this because we're talking to divinity students. I had a pretty holy spirited moment in a stairwell.
Yeah. Yeah. Conversion moments.
Yeah,
right?
where I got a surprising epiphany that I want to work with people and I want to do something community oriented, bringing my whole introvert self to that process somehow. I didn't know how. So I go back and I tell my best friend at YDS, her name's Lisa. So she was an MDiv. And I just kind of, this happened in the stairwell at, I can't remember the side of the quad of the horseshoe, but I was in that stairwell, had that moment, shared it with her. I don't know what to do with this, but it felt like a very strong epiphany and something that was calling me. And Lisa forcefully encouraged me to meet with Bill Gettler to talk about the prospect of shifting to the MDiv. So she was trying to bring me over to the other side. And I was very resistant because I knew that I didn't want to do parish ministry. This is too long to go into, but I don't even have a denominational affiliation. My mom is from a Pentecostal background in Alabama. My dad is from a Coptic Orthodox background in Egypt. So I'm pretty much all over the Christian map. So I didn't and still don't have a denominational affiliation, and certainly was not feeling called to do parish ministry, although I admire all of you who are doing that difficult work. So I was resistant to this idea, but she pretty much talked me into it. So I met with Dean Gettler. He made me a cup of tea, which really put me at ease. And
I've had a cup of tea in his office too.
Yeah, no, it's the best. It's very pastoral. Right. He's great at what he does.
Yeah.
And I was able to be really transparent with him. I kind of went in being like, well, I feel like I should, say why I should be shift to the MDiv. And I didn't. I just said, I had this moment in the stairwell. I don't know what it means. But I know I want to do something involving people and engaged with people. And I see MDivs doing a lot of community-oriented work. And he really, just listened and helped me see that shifting to the MDiv could help me discern my vocation. So I did the necessary paperwork and of course trembled when I saw that I had to do a preaching class.
I'm in it now.
Yeah, it's very challenging for introverts.
It's a push. Yeah.
Yeah. Have you had to watch a video of yourself preaching yet and get tips on your body language?
We have to record them all.
Yeah.
Because it's online.
Right. That was my least.
I'm actually enjoying it more than I expected. It's very it builds me up in a different way.
Yeah. And I found I discovered that I love sermon writing. So
such an explorative process.
Yeah. So I shifted to the MDiv, and for my supervised ministry, I did an internship at Iris. For many years, I'd been interested in refugees and immigrants. I had spent some time in Egypt with my dad's family and had the privilege and the blessing of getting to know some Sudanese communities that were living in Egypt. So I knew I wanted to do something, somehow explore how I could potentially work with refugees and immigrants. So I do my internship at Iris, and from the moment I walked in, I got a wonderful taste of that exhilarating chaos. And although I'm an introvert, it really gave me a lot of energy. I might need to go home and sit in a dark room for 20 minutes after a day at Iris to recharge my introvert battery. But while I was there, it's just so full of life. And so my internship involved a number of things, as most internships do. My primary project was recruiting interpreters.
Mm.
But, I was helping out in the food pantry and making phone calls and, just filling in where people needed help. Sometimes, we have an English class where there's like a side room where we have an early childhood education program. So sometimes the volunteers don't show up who are supposed to be working with the kids. So, I pop in there and get to hang out with kids from all over the world. So I show up for my internship one day. This is like circa 2013. And I run into this Ethiopian man I had chatted with him before. I mean, that was one of the great things just about being at Iris, is getting to talk to people and learn their stories.
Yeah.
And I ran into this Ethiopian man who had been a pastor back in Addis Ababa. And he asked me to pray for him, to pray that he would be able to find a way to do ministry in the US. Mm. And I said, of course I will. I'd be glad to pray for that. And he looked at me and he said, yes, because you are a man of God, lady.
Yes, you are.
And I was like, wow, that's a great compliment for an Ethiopian pastor to call me a man of God, lady. And then, we're continuing to talk, and then in walks in someone from a local mosque with boxes of halal meat, because many of our clients are Muslims. So every week, a local mosque donates halal meat for our Muslim clients who come to our food pantry, which is always on Wednesdays. So then I needed to help unload, I was like, I'm so sorry, I have to go. Thank you. I will be praying. Carry the halal meat to the food pantry. And then we had actually just gotten a delivery from the Connecticut Food Bank, which supplies a lot of our food pantry. And so, there are volunteers unloading the food pantry food. I've got the halal meat. We can hear the ESL class through the wall, the food pantry. So we're getting to hear refugees practice English. And one of the things I absolutely love about working with refugees, and you'll hear this a lot in our conversation, is just the beautiful ways that they speak English while they're learning that can often be more poignant than, how native English speakers would say it. And it's very close to my heart because my dad was an immigrant from Egypt. So often, and I have very poor and broken Arabic. So sometimes it's just this comedy of errors when I'm talking to, trying to speak Arabic to a Sudanese refugee, and she's trying to speak English to me, and we just get to laugh a lot, which is a great way to just build kinship with people. Yeah. So, we're hearing these wonderful phrases come out of the English classroom, and I'm up to my elbows in packets of halal meat, and I'm surrounded by boxes of rice-a-roni because that's what the food pantry had that day. And I just, again, had another Holy Spirited epiphany, and the phrase that came to me was, I want to be here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you've stayed.
So I've stayed. Yeah.
That's wonderful to hear. Yeah. I was an ESL teacher before. And I know what you mean. The poetry that can come from the creative mind of a non-native speaker. Yeah.
Yeah.
I hope people think of me that way in German.
A man of God lady in German. Yeah.
I am a German man. Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. So that's been a while. You've had some opportunity to see transformation at Iris, how things have grown and developed as times have changed. What sort of transformational leadership or transformation have you seen at Iris?
Yeah, so Iris is in a time of great internal transformation. Primarily because we are working with more and more undocumented immigrants than we ever have in the past. IRIS was founded in 1980 as a refugee resettlement agency with a contract with the U.S. State Department to, resettle refugees to primarily to the greater New Haven area, but we've been able to expand throughout the state through our co-sponsorship program. And we never had turned other types of immigrants away, but we really didn't have the capacity to serve non-refugee immigrants until the last couple of years, when we have built that capacity, both because our directors have made a decision to do that, and also to address the need of undocumented people in Connecticut. So from a social service perspective, the main difference between a refugee and an undocumented immigrant is that refugees are eligible for public benefits. So, Medicaid, food stamps, disability, whereas undocumented immigrants are not. The pandemic has been particularly devastating to undocumented communities. People have lost their jobs and they are not eligible for unemployment benefits. Right. They're not eligible for any stimulus money. So it's really transforming the way IRIS does social services and the way IRIS works with our refugee and immigrant clients. Now, from my role as someone who is engaging with communities outside of IRIS, from a community engagement perspective, I think this is largely about shifting narratives. When IRIS was working mostly with refugees, in speaking engagements, I would emphasize that that refugees have been invited by the U.S. government to resettle here after going through a long vetting process overseas, and that they arrive with the right to work and a path to citizenship. Primarily, I was doing that because I know that there were, of course, in 2015, 2016, 2017, there were a lot of concerns about refugees being potential terrorists. There was a lot of rhetoric around that. And so, I felt like a lot of my work was challenging and dispelling that notion. But I don't say those, I don't emphasize those facts about, refugees' legal status anymore, because I realized that doing so is potentially contributing to ideologies about who deserves to be here, who has a right to be here, and who deserves help. And now I feel called to evangelize the truth that everybody has a right to flourish here.
Yeah. Amen. Wow. That is a lot of transformation in your tenure at IRIS.
Yeah.
Wow.
And, we lose people. I mean, there are people who say, wait, I thought, you worked with legal people, and, you say, no one is illegal. Everybody has the right to flourish here.
Yeah.
We hope you'll get involved.
Yeah. Wow. Well, in light of that, are you seeing leadership happen as well?
Certainly so. Besides having excellent leaders in our organization, I would say the greatest place that I have witnessed leadership is in a program that was largely built by my coworker, friend, and current YDS student, Laurel McCormack. I hope many of you have had the opportunity to get to know her. So Laurel and another coworker of ours built a youth leadership program for refugee and immigrant high school students. I think they started, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And basically, the group is an opportunity to build cross-cultural friendships, because we've got clients from Democratic Republic of Congo and Sudan and Eritrea and Ethiopia and Afghanistan and Mexico and Barbados. So to build these cross-cultural friendships in which these youth support one another, and to do activities and workshops together. So they meet weekly, and what I've learned so much from Laurel and from the refugee and immigrant youth who participate is the tremendous leadership skill of creating space and opportunities for others to lead. And I see that so much. I get to participate sometimes in the leadership, in the youth leadership program. And every time I am amazed at the kinds of leadership that I witness. For example, over the summer, because of COVID, they were meeting on Zoom. And Laurel would ask the young women, what's it started as co-ed, and Laurel and our coworker who was building the program realized that things just work better when it was a girls group and a guys group. So Laurel facilitates the young women's group. And over the summer, around 4th of July, we're talking about 4th of July in the US, and she invited the young women to speak about Independence Day in their home countries, and to reflect on, what is freedom, who is free, who is not free, who is not all the way free. These really generative questions. And then it invited the young women to imagine if they could make up their own Independence Day, either for their home country or for the United States. What would it be like? What would you do? What would you eat? Where would people gather? What season would it be in? So it was really this wonderful, imaginative collaboration. And it was such a gift to be able to hear the young women's visions for liberation in their home countries. And a Congolese young woman named Mariam, she talked a lot about fashion. And, at first I was like, okay, she's a teenager, she likes fashion.
Yeah.
But then I realized when you talk about fashion in the Democratic Republic of Congo, right, it's a lot about decolonization. And she talked about this group that had, kind of taken some styles from the French colonists had brought certain styles to DRC, and made it their own, using, certain fabrics from the Congo and their own styles. And so it really is their fashion has a lot to do with liberation in certain contexts.
Yeah, it really does.
And so that was just a shining example. And then Mariam, she is an amazing leader. So she's a freshman at UConn now. Her family actually lives in a co-sponsoring near a co-sponsoring congregation in Old Lyme, which is, a lovely little shoreline town that is mostly white. And her family is one of the few Black families in the town. And over the summer, Mariam organized a Black Lives Matter rally in Old Lyme. And she spoke very powerfully. And so that's just one example of the ways that leadership is really a big part of IRIS's programs, and a big part of what I've gotten to witness there.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. I imagine too that these students, these young people, have built up a lot of resilience. They've become incredible young adults, it sounds like. Can you tell me a little about resilience that you've seen in your clients?
Absolutely. I often say that refugees are my greatest teachers in resilience.
Yeah.
And the best way I can share that with others is to tell a story.
Great.
From a couple of years ago, I got to go on a civil rights pilgrimage with Laurel and with a group of refugee and immigrant teens who were part of this youth leadership group. Um, and so Laurel is from Georgia. I'm from Alabama. So this was also such a spiritual experience for us to go to our home towns with these amazing young women from all over the world, to see it through their eyes. And honestly, I feel Monica's, we have we have some common experience in Birmingham.
Yeah.
To see Alabama through their eyes is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And I was just, and also to see civil rights history through their eyes. And one thing that I was struck by, is, we'd be walking through Kelly Ingram Park, where it was the site of the 1963 Children's March.
Children's March, right?
Yeah. So that, and they heard the story of youth playing hooky from school and coming and marching, and the police unleashing water hoses and dogs on them, and there's a statue of that iconic image, and to stand in front of that statue with those young women and have them just, first of all, with utter empathy, right? They cried, but they were also just celebrating what those young people did there. And one part of the story of the Children's March, we had watched a documentary of it, talks about the kids, coming day after day to march, and many of them were taken to jail. And that even while they were being arrested, they were singing freedom songs. So to get more difficult, we went to Montgomery, to the Equal Justice Initiative, which is Brian Stevenson's organization, and to visit the lynching memorial. And I was very, very nervous about visiting that with young women who have likely experienced some sort of trauma in their lives. And yet Laurel and I felt that it was important to go. And, of course, we tried to prepare, we had chartered a bus. So we, on the bus, tried to prepare people for it and say, obviously, if you want to sit this one out, please do. Or if anytime you need to leave, just come get one of us. And, but what we discovered was that we didn't need to comfort them or take care of them, in that it was actually an opportunity for us to learn about witnessing and remembrance and honoring all of the people who died from acts of racial terror. So we were in, there's the main part of the lynching memorial actually has these monuments that look like gravestones. Also, although we learned that they are also the dimensions of a coffin, that have engraved in them the names of counties and the names of lynching victims in those counties. And, many of them obviously were engraved with unknown. And Laurel and I each found our home counties. And, I felt very, even though, maybe the young women didn't know exactly what was happening with us internally, I just felt held and supported by them. And also that their capacity to witness in a way that honors very devastating things that have happened. This is, they've been through that in their own lives, and they were able to be present and empathetic and do that at the lynching memorial. And one of the displays as you're leaving that memorial is actually it's a glass display case, but again, it's the dimensions of a casket, and it was full of soil that had been collected from all over the South from lynching sites. And the Miriam, who I had told you had organized a Black Lives Matter rally in Old Lyme, she was very, very moved by the soil. And, you know, she talked to, she said, you know, it's kind of like a time machine, you know, it really puts you in the place, and, you know, it has a lot to do with what happened and connects you with history. And some of the soil I hadn't even noticed, but some of the soil had fallen to the floor. We had learned from some of the docents of the museum that the floor was made of trees that were used in lynchings. So there's this soil on this ground of trees that were used in lynchings, and Miriam just very, you know, it just seemed almost like second nature to her. She just stooped down and touched the soil and knelt there for a second, and the best thing I could do was follow her lead. And I did the same, and that felt exactly the way to honor those people. And then, so we stand up, and as we're leaving the memorial, another young Congolese woman named Lola started singing a freedom song that we had heard at the 16th Street Baptist Church, where the 4 young girls had died in a church bombing. And then back on the bus, Lola proceeds to lead all of us in a song from the anti-apartheid movement from South Africa. It's called Freedom is Coming. And we're all singing, and it's a beautiful and joyful song. And later I was talking with Lola's sister Gladys, who Gladys is in college, and she was kind of like a co-chaperone with me and Laurel. She was the one who would make sure all the girls were up on time. And one time I overheard her, she's kind of like the you know, the RA. So one time I overheard her telling one of the girls, or a couple of the girls who were running late, she said, "There's something in this country called time management, and you need to learn it." So she really knows she knows how to lead, right? So, or get people in line. But so Gladys was sharing with me a bit about how she and Lola had first encountered this Freedom is Coming song. They had seen it in the movie Sarafina. And it's about a student movement in Soweto, the movie. And you know, and the song you repeat over and over, freedom is coming, yes, I know. And Gladys said that you know, she was basically exegeting the song for me, and she was saying, you have to keep promising yourself that something brighter is coming. And she said, you have to keep practicing. And, you know, to me, that was such an epiphany as well. Like, liberation is a practice, and it's never finished. And you're practicing it no matter what external circumstances, no matter how dark and oppressive that is. You've always got to keep practicing liberation. And then, you know, she said, sometimes songs keep me going. She said, you know, when I'm down, songs really lift me up. And then she said, resilience is about endurance. And again, you know, to me, that was a new way to think about resilience. You know, in white American culture, I think resilience is often thought of as like getting right back up after a blow. And, you know, it's quite triumphal. And this is really about the slow, enduring work of liberation. And so you might stay falling down for a little while, but you can sing freedom songs while you're on the ground.
While you're down. Yeah, absolutely. Wow. You're painting a picture of Alabama, and working with refugees and
Yeah.
English language learners. That's very familiar and dear to me too.
I'm so glad. I honestly will say, and I haven't figured out how to fully explain this, but I feel such a stronger sense of belonging in Alabama than after being there with those young women than I have since I left for college and became like a liberal New England person.
I definitely felt a similar way taking my husband to Alabama for the first time and showing him a lot of civil rights places. I lived in Birmingham and in Selma, and near Montgomery.
Oh,
So
I didn't
these
know that
really,
you'd lived in Selma.
yeah,
Wow.
it really changes. It can really change one's outlook
Mm-hmm.
and one's worldview.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to be confronted with these ideas every day. And in my work with refugees, it was in Austria, but something that took maybe 3 days to figure out is I am there to learn, not just to teach. I was there as a teacher. Can you talk a little bit about that reciprocity?
Absolutely. So much of working with newcomer refugees and immigrants is helping them navigate a country in which English is the dominant language and helping them navigate systems here, like the public school system, the healthcare system, and of course, everyone's favorite bureaucracy, right? Like, to get anything done in any country, you have to deal with bureaucracy, and the US has its own particular systems. So I had helped a Sudanese woman named Amal. Her name actually means hope in Arabic. Helped her fill out an application for energy assistance. So there's a state program that helps people pay their heating bills in the winter. And of course, there's a long application and it requires a lot of documentations like pay stubs and, just various things and, proof that your kids are getting free lunch at school and all of these things. So I had worked on the application with Amal and worked with her to gather all the documentations that she would need. And the fastest way to actually get the energy assistance is to physically go down to an office in New Haven. I think it's on Whaley Ave. So I accompanied Amal to that office because, as we all know, often people who are working in bureaucratic places are, not the most flexible people, although it's important and good work. But, just in case anything came up, I was going to be there to accompany Amal through the process of submitting the application. You can't just drop it off. You have to wait in line for a long time, wait in a waiting room for a long time to talk with a worker and basically finalize the application. So there were a lot of people waiting that day. We waited, picture the busiest day at the DMV, and that's sort of what it was like there. So we're waiting and waiting. And then we finally get to the desk of a worker who we think, oh, finalize the application, hallelujah. And then it turns out that we were missing one document. I can't remember what it was, but I know that it had nothing to do with Amal's family's eligibility for heating assistance. It was just one of those boxes you have to check off, and we didn't have that. And I was exasperated. We spent all this time. We thought we'd done everything we were supposed to do. We're going to have to come back another day. It delays the process of Amal getting help with the heating costs. It's getting cold, completely exasperated. And as we were leaving, I kind of noticed that Amal kind of seemed like she was like kind of laughing to herself, or just definitely not exasperated. And she looked at me and she smiled and she said, "We wasted a good time together." And that was such a light bulb for me. Time is not the commodity that we make of it. It's not about wasting or spending it. It's about sharing it. It's a gift. And so yeah, we had shared and wasted a great time together. We had laughed and shared stories, and we commiserated over what it's like when telemarketers call you and tell you, congratulations, you've won a trip to the Bahamas, and we had just had a great time. And it was helping me remember and center on the truth that it's really about relationships.
Yeah. There's that leadership goal again.
Right? Absolutely.
Leading with relationships. Oh, yeah. That's wonderful. Wow. So you had another experience that allowed hope to swell up in you in a reading group that you were discussing the very famous and lauded speech by Dr. King. Could you talk about that, a bit about what happened and how it shapes your hope for a turbulent a future in a turbulent time?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I'll give a little background on what inspired me to organize a reading group with refugees to read Dr. King's "I Have a Dream" speech. So it was the morning after the 2016 election, and I showed up at Iris. It was before the clients had come. Clients usually come in when it's time for English class to start. So it was a little before most of the refugee and immigrant clients showed up. So it was mostly staff, which at the time was mostly white people who had been born and raised in the US. And it was a very despondent vibe. People were walking around very bleary-eyed. They'd been up late watching the election returns. Of course, for people who work with refugees and immigrants, this is not a good forecast for us or people that we love.
Right.
And the ESOL teacher was wearing black. Somebody said it's like a funeral here. And then the refugees and immigrants show up for English class and coming to see their case manager and various things that they're going to do there. And I would say that Iris came alive again, and it felt like a bright funeral. The way that you gather and practice joy, even in the midst of grief. So Amal came in that day with her good friend Azar, also a Sudanese mom. And when I saw them, I just said, I'm so sorry. They are African Muslim women. So, and they have relatives overseas who they were hoping to bring to the US, which the Trump administration would make pretty much impossible. And I knew also Azar has a little brother who is an unaccompanied minor living in South Sudan that she was hoping to apply to bring him to join her here. So, I knew I had at least an inkling, of how much these people that I love have to lose in what was to come. And I just said, I'm so sorry. And Azar said, I'm okay. I keep my hope. And then she told me that she had started taking social work classes at Gateway Community College. She actually has a law degree from the University of Cairo, but credentials don't transfer. So she's having to start over with higher education. And she said she started a social work class, and she told me about her dream of someday starting a children's home for unaccompanied minors like her little brother.
Like her brother.
And then Amal in her, I've come up with this phrase actually through talking with refugees. It's what I call survival humor.
Okay.
Amal is a master of survival humor, and
That rings true. Yeah.
she looks at me, and this, it's, just to back up and say, they have so much more to lose in Trump's America than I do. I'm upset and despondent, but nothing that vital to me is at risk, whereas they are, and yet they're the ones encouraging me on that day. And Amal said, things will drive you crazy, drive you nervous, drive you depressed, but you have to keep your hope, even if it is small, like a match. And it was after that day that I said, I need to have more conversations just like this. I hope it helps the refugees, but this is for me. So I invited Amal, Azhar, and a few other refugees who I had conversations like that with, who were interested in, we talked about liberation and hope and resilience. I invited them to read Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech with me. And so we decided to do it, the leading up to MLK Day in 2017. So that's also leading up to the inauguration. What a moment. And we were reading the speech together, and, the refugees that I was reading the speech with really helped me see the arc of history, to use Dr. King's words, bending towards justice, even in such a dark time when you're seeing that, well, it feels like any progress towards justice is being derailed. But they have built the resilience and the endurance and the hope to see something brighter coming, even in very, very dark times. So I was really able to just witness and receive their wisdom of taking a long view and seeing something brighter coming. And they helped me realize that the most important line of the speech is, I still have a dream. It's the still, I still have a dream. And I asked Amal to tell me what a dream means to her, what having a dream means to her. And she said, a dream, it's something that's near to impossible. To get to it, you have to work very hard. It is far, but we are on our way.
Yeah, it is far, but we are on our way. That is a wonderful idea to let rest in our minds for a while.
Absolutely.
And, to wrap this up as well, thank you so much for sharing these stories. They're moving and deeply meaningful. I appreciate your time and energy for this, and for the contribution it is to our transformational leadership series.
Thank you. It's just been so wonderful to kind of revisit these stories, to retell them and share them. So
there's power in storytelling, definitely.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you. And I would thank our viewers as well. I appreciate the time they take to think about leadership in turbulent times, and perhaps we can all be better for it.